Ladies and gentlemen. How are we all? Do we all get difficult flights here? And I know this is a difficult morning for some of you. The great Queen has died. It's her funeral this morning, so if there's any Germans in the audience who want to observe a minute's silence, please do. For the rest of us, this panel is brought to you by Europa Distribution, which represents distributors slash publishers, as I feel we should be calling them as well, and the festival, of course, this fantastic festival. This seems to get harder every year to get to with the aeroplanes, but we'll all share those stories of how we got here before. But it's wonderful to be back here in San Sebastian. So the theme, I'm Michael Gubbins. I'll be moderating this discussion, and the theme, and I'll introduce you at the moment to the panel, but the theme of this discussion, there's a few re's in there: Reconstruction, reignite, but I think it's quite important to understand this isn't about going back. This isn't about an imagined golden age before COVID came and ruined everything. I think what we'll be hearing here is we're in a long period of adaptation and change that will be that each one of the panelists have dealt with in different kind of ways that go quite a long way before COVID. But I think what we're really talking about here is renewing that kind of passion for diverse, risk-taking European film, and how we can make that happen in a kind of ecosystem that actually can deliver audiences to great diverse content. And the part of that context is obviously that this is an age of those big streamers with their algorithms. And I think maybe it's worth thinking about that in terms of that's more in the demand manipulation world, where you can give people a diet of what they want or what they think they want. Here I think we're talking about the demand creators. We're talking about the people who are igniting those passions, as put here, creating that spark for stuff that people don't necessarily know they want. It's that excitement of European film which is at the heart of the discussion today. And distributors and publishers are obviously on the front line of this. So I think we've got the right people to talk about the strategies and approaches to a changing world. So we have, for the panel, Andrei from Transilvania Film. We'll hear a bit about this, but one of those organizations that I think we're going to hear about a lot here, which is not simply about a linear model where you've got one platform and one approach to a passive audience. There are lots and lots of different ways, from festivals and distribution and indeed the kind of cinematic universe as well, that I think we'll hear about. We have Ben here from Gruvi, that a lot of you probably are aware of already, but a kind of leading, it's not quite fair to just call it a digital marketing agency, which is what you call yourselves on your site, but it is very much about creating those connections between audience and film, and we'll hear about those as we go on. We have Anne from Cinema Delicatessen, which is a documentary specialist from the Netherlands, but actually one I think that has I think has been very experimental and has actually helped build that creative documentary world, which has been one of the perhaps not told enough growth stories of the last few years culturally. And then we have Katarzyna from Gutek Film, which I think is one of those serial innovators in our market for a very, very long time, and again, working across lots of different approaches to audiences, and again, different platforms, different ways of looking at it. So what we're going to do at the end of this is come away with all of you going away thinking we're in good hands here. There's lots of strategic approaches, lots of innovation, lots of ideas. So maybe we can start with you, Andrei. So the premise, first of all, of this discussion is that idea of the audience changing, that somehow there has been fundamental shifts in the way that audiences think and behave. And I think it's probably worth, with all of you, just giving your sense of what that change might be in practice.
Good morning, everyone, first of all. Yeah, when I was asked to be part of this panel while having a talk with the other panelists and with Michael, I was telling them that the company that I'm representing, Transilvania Film, is part of a larger structure, including also a film festival. So some of the films that we're getting into cinemas, we're actually buying only for the cinemas. Some of them come through the film festival. And most of the ideas that we've tried in the past years, we've actually tested in the film festival, and then with Transilvania Film. And I was telling them that this year at the festival we had a partnership with TikTok. I don't know how many of you are familiar with TikTok. I'm not a big fan, but I have to admit that I began watching what's happening on TikTok during the pandemic. It was important for us because I think we find a younger audience there, but not only younger. I mean, from what I've seen, some of our usual audiences are there also. I mean, people in their 30s, even 40s, but mainly we can find younger audiences there. So this year we have tested at the festival this partnership with TikTok. We even had a contest there to try to bring them closer. Something like a film storyteller. That was the subject of the contest. We had people creating small videos in which they were telling the story of a film without telling us the title of the film. And the most creative approaches were given accreditations to the festival. And we had people not that interested in the film festival, but interested in films that entered the contest. Even those who won, they didn't even know what the word accreditation meant. They weren't familiar with what's happening in a film festival, or usually the films that we usually have in program or in distribution with Transilvania Film. But they are interested in film in general. And I think that by using this approach, we can bring them a little closer to what we're doing, even if we're talking about European art house films and not necessarily what they're usually watching.
So what we're talking about here is the old thinking around social media was that it was the replacement for kind of paper advertising. But when you talk about TikTok, you're talking about creating relationships and different kinds of approaches. It's not just an old form of down marketing. It's actually getting people feeling more involved in the whole process of selection and film.
Yeah, of course. And it's very important in reaching new audiences for what we're bringing in cinemas. Because in the past years, we have been concentrating on online promotion. I think most of us have, partly because of the pandemic and partly because, outdoor promotion is really expensive compared to what we can do in online with the same amount of money.
Yeah, it's interesting, that notion that TikTok is not just like the new Facebook even. It's just, again, it's about different approaches that create personal relationships between people, festival and film. Tell me about, in terms of the selection, so you work with different platforms. You've got the festival and you've got the cinematic distribution and you've got the VOD platform. Tell me how that fits in this world. How do you find the best way to get audiences to see the content that you would like them to see, that exciting stuff, using those different platforms? How do they fit together?
Well, the fact that we are part of a larger structure somehow allows us to address not only people that can reach the film festival. So some of them are really big fans of the film festival and they're not planning to miss it. They're there every year, but most of them are outside this bubble. Some of them we can reach in cinemas. And beginning with 2009, as Michael said, the festival also has a VOD platform. It's called TIFF Unlimited, where some of the titles in the film festival reach, I don't know, depending on the title, some of them enter a couple of months after. Some of them are even during the festival, but just a few. That's due to different distribution rights and other issues. And some of them enter between two editions of the festival. I mean, trying to get people for the new edition by offering them films from the past edition, showing them what they missed or what is our approach about the film festival program or distribution plans.
So curation still matters a very great deal, but curation also, you're identifying things that perhaps work best in a cinematic. You know, they're going to have the best release on the big screen, and the ones that perhaps fit more around the kind of catch-up, the online element to that. That seems to me still a relatively new science, you know, working out what works best. I just wondered if you've got any insights onto how you go about doing that.
I have to admit that I still feel like we're experimenting. First of all, from the films that we bring in the cinemas, films that were in Transilvania Film Festival, we usually have the habit of taking the film that won the Transylvania Trophy Award, the biggest prize, if it's not already bought by some other distributor. We take that and put into cinemas. Also films that get the Audience Award, because we know that those will work in the cinemas. They've been there, they were very well received. And yeah, some of the other titles go directly to the film platform, to the VOD platform.
Yeah, it's an interesting takeaway. We'll talk to Anne about this as well. But the idea of the Audience Award, you know, the days when the critics would decide what the great thing is, maybe that the kind of influence of the traditional critic may be slipping in favor of more of that sense of how the audience perceives what works on the big screen. It's a theme we may come back to. But Anne, you're... I think with documentary, again, it feels to me from the way that the documentary has grown, a lot of this is about community building. A lot of this isn't old-fashioned marketing. It's something quite different. Maybe you could explain how you see the development of the audience for your work.
Yes, we... good morning, everyone. Yeah, so I release only documentaries in cinema, so no fiction, and most of our documentaries are European, so either Dutch or European produced. And we have been doing this for almost 12, 13 years, so we know how to reach a documentary audience, and basically we have two ways of reaching our audience, and that is we've done this before the pandemic as well. So it's not for us. The pandemic didn't change the way we worked. The first audience, the usual audience, is basically what I have to say is the documentary lovers, and those are cinema goers, people that are. Interested in art house cinema and like a sort of a general basic public, and within that public that goes to art house theaters, there is a specific documentary lovers target group really. We don't really reach them directly, but just releasing a film in an art house theater, that is already reaching a documentary audience. So that's quite an easy target group. And then, because we work with documentaries, we don't have the benefit of a famous actor or a famous director. So we need to base our marketing on content or on the theme or the topic of the film. That can be very specific or broader, like an environmental film. So then you target environmental activists, or very, very specific smaller groups. Like we released a film about a famous Dutch skater and a skateboarder, and then you target all the skaters, basically. So that's basically the way we work. And in the second specific audience, we really try to get to the heart of that target group. So we do some sort of research, like 2 or 3 months in advance. And it's very labor intensive, because you basically every topic of the film you have to reinvent the wheel, because you have to come into the skaters community or into the environmentalist community, and then within that community you do your marketing either offline or online. We do both. And so we try to, like in 2 months in advance of the release, we try to build up this community based on the topic of the film. And yeah, so is that answering your question?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to clarify a few things here. So there is a documentary-loving community that is self-selecting, and maybe you've built those up over time.
Yeah.
And they're the ones that perhaps are the easiest to get, because they're going to go and see things because you've curated them and because it's a documentary.
Yes.
I'm presuming that TikTok isn't the main mechanism.
No, because that group is our film theaters that we work with in the Netherlands. They monitor their visitors, and like the basic visitors that go to art house theaters are generally not the young people. So in the Netherlands, there are older people, and specifically even older females, as women. And so that's like our basic community around the documentary, and they go to the cinema because they think that the art house theater that they love going to is already curating any film that screens there. So we are lifting on that curation as well, and on the reputation of the film theater and the art house theater. So yeah.
So for that group, I mean, things like the more traditional approaches of critics, for example, do they still have an influence, do you think, over that particular part of your audience?
I don't understand the question.
No, I mean the old way would have been that the newspaper critic says it's great, and then people go along. So the old.
I'm not sure actually, because we monitor all the visitors in cinema. Then sometimes people or the media writes and give 2-star films. And massive people go there, and the 5-star reviews only 5,000 visitors. So we don't really.
No, so it is actually your curation that matters to this. You know, that art house audience is quite loyal, I think you're suggesting, but older.
Yeah, exactly, and that's why because it's older, we don't use yet. We actually are in the process of starting using TikTok, like Andrei is saying. It's more experimental, and if we have a documentary about that is suitable for younger people, like a youth documentary, we call it, then we will try and use the socials like TikTok. But now we do just the basics. We have Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn, and I think that's it.
But you're doing something really interesting here, which seems to be the clue to the way forward. So there's the traditional community that you do, that still the old stuff works, but actually for every film, that's only potentially quite a small percentage of the total market for what you're looking for.
Yeah, for sure.
So that is where you're saying you're trying to build a community out of a niche interest. So that might be cycling or skating or anything else.
Yeah.
you say you research that. I'm sure everyone's interested to know how you research those things. I mean, it's
we do that
partnerships.
actually. We do the research together with producers, because the producers, they have been working on this film for maybe 4 or 5 years. So they are already very much deep into that niche community. So when we release the film, we always work together with the producer to ask, like, you know, what kind of groups or what kind of organizations are interested in this film, and then we sort of take it over from the producer, because the producer's already busy with producing a new film, and we take over that kind of research. But yeah, it's a long process, and it's very, like I said before, very labor intensive. So,
do you have an example of it working well?
Yeah, I've got heaps of examples. Yeah, we released a documentary about street cats in Istanbul, and basically all our colleagues, we work with 5 people in the office. Nobody is a cat lover, so we are not we're not in that community ourselves. So we had to do the research from scratch, and we discovered a whole world of cats on the internet, and basically it's a very tight community, and it's very large, and there are heaps of blogs and heaps of websites, and it's crazy. And then when you come with a documentary about stray cats in Istanbul, the whole community jumps on it. So we had 75,000 visitors for that film, and I think maybe 80% is not a documentary moviegoer, not a regular documentary movie, but it's really specific. Everyone that went to the cinema for this film was just a cat lover and not necessarily documentary lover. So that was a very interesting way of working, because we didn't target our usual art house cinema.
I feel allergic just thinking about that cat movie. I'm going to start sneezing in a moment. But that's a great example. So what I mean, in the world you're now looking at, it's not enough just to think, I've got a film I'm going to release in a cinema and I'm going to put a bit of marketing around. What you're doing is finding different ways into the consciousness of those audiences, what's going to excite them. And the media platform, the social media platform or the marketing form you take is based on how they are already behaving with each other.
Yeah, exactly, because you just tap into what is already existing. And so we wrote all the cat blogs that the film was coming, and then sometimes we do giveaways, and we have merchandise, and we did the craziest things you can do with cat lovers, because we bought these little hairbands with ears, and so everyone in the cinema, we gave them to every visitor in one screening. So the whole audience was with cat ears. It's crazy. It looks really crazy, but people really like it. So it's like an event-based release, really. Like it's more of an experience to go to the cinema, and so that's so we tap into that community, and when it's a match, it's perfect, because we need them and they need content like us.
Yeah.
So and we try to do that with every film, but not every film is suitable for that depth of.
No, cat lovers are weird. There's no question about that.
Yes.
But
we tried. Actually, it was a funny story. We tried doing a few years later the exact same thing with stray dogs in Istanbul. So the film's called Stray, and it was a different producer, different director, but it was basically exactly the same film, only then with dogs. And instead of 75,000 visitors, we had 2,000 visitors. So, and we did exactly the same research in the dog community, but the dog people don't, not interested in
dog lovers have a life. Dog lovers go out walking and meeting other dog walkers.
Yeah, that was one of our
people
theories.
Are just in
that was our
theory.
theory.
Yeah. So, look, I think this is, I mean, we can have the fight between the cats and dog lovers as the thing goes on. Yeah. But I think that's a really great example, though, of what you were saying, every film is kind of R&D. I mean, and if you're starting every single release with the idea there is you can have a certain base that you can build around, but actually to really create an audience around it, you've actually got to start connecting with the stuff that those people actually watch, rather than trying to convince them that they need to be art house lovers. And I think that's a really interesting example. I'm going to come back to a couple of those themes if I can as we go on, but if I can move over to Katarzyna, the Gutek, I think, is in some ways, I think when you listen to both of those, you'll recognize some themes that you're already doing. But when you look back at your own history as an organization, it's been one of constant adaptation and change. Is there something that's that you feel has changed in the last couple of years, or some way that the audience is moving, and how are you responding to that change?
I mean, actually, good morning, everybody. Actually, all I see is change, and all I see is evolving, and all I see is experiment. And that's what we do, actually, with every film. And in the last pandemic, I think, not really change things, but kind of make them more intensive, and that change is basically more visible. But what we are doing, as Michael said, I mean, I feel like it's a combination of what is Andrei doing and what Anne doing, and what we've been doing for years. And it's kind of this whole lot of processes that we have to tackle. Because even if you think about promotion, it's like a few years ago, 10 years ago, you would have you would put an ad in a national newspaper, and you will basically have most of your target group covered. But now, people live in niches, people are interested in niches. You don't really have any medium, I would say, that target everybody, because even on Facebook or Instagram or TikTok, people are closed in their niches, and they are observing things that are interesting for them, and many times closed in the bubble that other people are not. So on one hand, of course, we do have a base group, the group of film lovers and art house lovers, that we try to inform and market every time we release a film, but that's our base, and we feel like it's a groundwork that we always have to do, and we cooperate on that, for instance, with Gruvi, when basically we feel like the Facebook or Instagram campaign it's a base of what we do, and with every film we kind of retarget the people that already been to our films. To make that group every time even bigger. But we also see that, and research shows, after pandemic especially, that a large part of that group is also disappearing. I mean, Polish Film Institute made a research after pandemic, and it shows that, most of, for instance, the audience 60 plus is almost gone. Like from the people who were really going a lot to cinemas, they still haven't come back. So we are forced basically to look for new audiences, whether they will be younger or whether they be people who so far were not going to cinema that often. So on one hand, of course, it's that basis that we're covering, but then like Anne, we are searching basically for new audiences, and we distribute mostly fiction. Feature films, but we work in a very similar way. So apart from the base you have, you're looking for different issues of the film or different communities that could be interested in that film. And what we do, we basically, with every title, we look for different institutions or partners that we could work for. Because as I said, everybody works in niches, so you have to kind of find partners that are already there, already have their audience, and that you can use their audience or their fan base to market your films to them. So we really do plenty of different, sometimes quite crazy cooperations to every film. For instance, now for the film of, it's just a small example, but for the film Io by Jerzy Skolimowski, we basically, the main character of the film is a donkey. No, we're not working with donkey farms, but for instance, there is a very famous porcelain producer in Poland who actually is famous for producing small figurines of animals, which are quite expensive, and they have a series of donkeys. And the director by hand painted a series of donkeys, and we're basically using that cooperation to get a completely different audience to be aware of the film. So it's really a series of plenty of different cooperations. So it seemed that's really working, because you're basically expanding your base, and some of those people that came to the cinema once, they enjoyed it. They already know who you are, and that you're showing nice films. So maybe they're gonna look for some other titles of yours, and they increase your base group basically. So,
yeah, there's lots of interesting things. Apart from, obviously, you'll explain to people where they can get these porcelain donkeys from, because
limited edition.
I don't think any house is really complete now without a porcelain donkey. But just very quickly, the 60-plus audience. This is very significant. I mean, have you done any research? I still don't know where they've gone. I mean, I see them in the street. I'm nearly one of them.
I mean, the one thing came in the research, it was like two main points. Like for all the people that, for instance, not going to cinema anymore, which is mostly 60 plus. That one thing is that they've lost the habit of going to cinema. That basically, that's something that used to be a habit for them, that they used to meet with friends and go together to cinemas. Of course, they're slightly still afraid of pandemics. I mean, for many of us, pandemic is gone, but for many people, especially older, the pandemic is not gone. They're still afraid, but they kind of lost the urge and the habit of going to cinema. And the other thing is many of them saying that it's a content, that somehow they don't see films for themselves. So I guess it's even more important now for distributors that you have to be a curator. You have to pick films, you have to choose the right titles that can be interested for your audience. So already buying a film, you're not buying only because it got an award in Cannes, but you already need to think about people you can market it to, so and whether you'll be able to actually find an audience.
Yeah, I think there's so many fascinating thoughts coming through there. I mean, maybe the more diverse, risk-taking cinema that we're looking for may actually be turning off a very conservative audience, or maybe a very conservative audience is just not finding stuff. I mean, there's so many different things in there, but I think the positive out of it, which seems to be the change of strategy, seems to be an attitude that actually the best way to get new audiences and to build those habits is to actually work with the grain of whatever it is that they're interested in elsewhere, find those partners, find those partnerships that are seeking the same people. And in a way, I could see how our big concern about the how do we get young people into cinema, it has felt sometimes our strategy is to sit kids down in a cinema and say, you're not leaving here till you learn to love Tarkovsky. And now it feels like you're going more. You're seeing them, the audience as a less homogenous and more as individuals with different interests and different diverse thinking on life. That seems to me a positive.
Yeah, because research shows that the young people are the ones that are going to cinemas, and that they are willing to go to cinemas. Apart from watching films on platforms, of course. But they look for something that could be an event, that they're looking for something they could go with friends and something that could interest them. So basically, you do need to find something to show them. So of course, there are films that will be interesting for all age groups and all target groups, but there are films that will be, very specific to a particular audience, and you kind of need to address that. And as well, in promotion, for instance, apart from looking for partners, we also kind of experiment and looking into different platforms. It's not only Facebook or Instagram. We're basically trying to find where these people could be in the internet. So we try TikTok as well. We try Pinterest. We try something that is a Polish version of Reddit, even. So we try Twitter. So we're really experimenting on all different platforms, looking for people. Where could they be?
Yeah, it's a really interesting approach. But Anne, I think you're.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask you a question. How do you see the younger audience getting into the habit of going to the cinema? That's one thing, but also paying for it. Like in Holland, the ticket is more than 10 euros, and that seems to be something that my generation grew up with. When you go to cinema, you pay money. still, it's a cheap evening out for me, but cheaper than going to a restaurant. But still, for younger people who grow up with internet and streaming, it's a very large sum of their budget. So we had this skate film as a small example, and we thought, well, all the skaters, because it was about the world champion skater, and he was from Holland. So every skater in Holland knew him, and it was like a very intimate portrait of him, documentary. And so we, during the premiere, we set up this whole skate rank, and we invited all the skate groups to come and skate, and then at 8 o'clock, at 8 p.m., the film started. And then at 8 p.m., all the older people got into the cinema, and all the younger people, they just kept on skating on the skate rinks. And then we asked them, why aren't you going in? This is a film about your hero. And then they all said, no, I'll watch it online someday. It's too expensive. I'll watch it online. It'll come online eventually. And we were like completely shocked and flabbergasted. Like, how did we not see this coming? So that was our first time targeting a really young audience, and it completely failed. And I think because of money for a ticket. But
yeah, it's a really good point to bring Gruvi in, actually, because a lot of this is about, seems to me, about data and understanding and knowledge of who these people are. It feels like there's a lot of work there, and that's kind of your role, in a sense, to look at those habits and how you form habits and so on. So, I mean, you can introduce what Gruvi does to start with, and maybe give it that context of how you see the audience at the moment.
Yeah, sure. So in 2017, we did our first raise with Creative Europe, and the idea was to build an audience data platform for independent film in Europe. And one of our main hypotheses was marketing today is quite broken, and I think that's been reflected in what's happened after the pandemic. Most distributors are working, basically reinventing the wheel with each film that they're working on. There's very little carryover, particularly within the majors. I think independents have always been forced to be more innovative because of the resource constraints, but most major distributors, they work with an agency. The agency basically does a big brand campaign. They approach it with the same line of thinking as, automotive or consumer goods. And there's very little thought around performance or who they're reaching or how the story of, that they're trying to convey to that audience needs to differ. So, we've come from a very rapid change. It used to be Facebook was everything, and now everyone's fragmented off into different niches. People are using WhatsApp, people are using, messenger services. There are numerous, communities, everything from, Reddit down to, well, I've just heard about a local version of Reddit, so I'll be looking into that in Poland. And, the conversations that are going on there are related to interests and behaviors. I think the key thing that's come out of the pandemic for us is we've spent the last 10 years talking to cinemas and just trying to explain to them, look, on the other side of the table in your business is a distributor who's spending all the money to reach the audiences, and you receive the audiences, but you make the money from selling popcorn. Why don't you open up your website, your point of sale systems that you're using, and allow the distributors to take advantage of that? Because if more bums end up on seats at the end of the day, everyone benefits, including you, because you'll sell more popcorn. And it really took the pandemic for that conversation to suddenly become relevant, because I stood up in front of the Munich Cinema Congress back in 2012 and explained this concept of, hey, social media is available. We can start to not only target by what people are interested in, but behaviors, right? Behaviors around buying tickets online is a very specific series of events that people have to do in order to complete a purchase. And from what we found from all the investigation that we were looking at is most cinemas aren't even retargeting anyone. So a typical scenario happens where someone books a ticket, the front doorbell goes off, their kid asks them a question, or for whatever reason, the cat jumps on their lap. They don't complete the purchase, but they had the intent. to go and see that film that evening. And maybe they rock up to the cinema that day and go and buy the ticket, or more often than not, they forget about things because, as we all have understood over the last 10 years, we've become much more distracted, much more fragmented in our behavior. So one of the things that's opened up from our side is, the pandemic has caused cinemas to approach us because now they're beginning to realize, well, we need to market better and we need to collaborate with our distributors better. And so within the campaigns that we've been running internationally in places like the Middle East, in Dubai and Saudi Arabia, and to a certain extent in UK and is emerging in Norway and Denmark now, when you have a bead on who buys tickets, when you are able to target the behavior and then match it to the interest in the film, you'll generally see a 5 to 6 times increase in the number of tickets that are sold than if you're just using Facebook targeting to try and reach someone. And I think this is the major innovation that needs to happen now across the industry. We need to try and move the cinema. The cinemas, they control the data, they control the point of sale. They're essentially the e-commerce web shop. And the distributors have the budgets to do the advertising, but it's not like we're selling T-shirts here or shoes, right? There's a fundamental data gap here that's missing, and I think there's a very, very bright future if we can start to figure out that nuance between interest in certain film genres and perhaps I'll wait to see it online. Versus, no, I'm going to go and do something tonight, and I have an interest in this type of documentary or this kind of independent art house production, and that director that I like is playing. And ooh, look, there's a ticket that's available within my location now, right? And then if I go through that process of trying to book the ticket for that film, and the front doorbell goes, the cat jumps on my lap, my kid asks me a question, I'm going to get a series of follow-up ads to make sure that I complete the purchase. Because that kernel of data, as we're working with Gutek, you can model that. It's the best way of describing it. You can go back to the ad platforms, right? And you can say, hey, I've got this group of 10,000 people that have bought tickets for this type of film. I would like to model it into 100,000 people, right? You can increase the reach of your campaign cheaply. You can more or less start to hit the people that have similar behaviors and interests. And again, you're still getting a very, very good return on the investments that you're making. So with Gruvi, what we're trying to do right now is solve instead of throwing your money into the ether and, crossing your fingers and hoping for the best, you throw your money out there, but we are able to then show you what your return on advertising will yield you and whether or not your film is on track to actually hit the targets that you've set, and then use those ideas and that data to help you with future media planning based around behavior and interest in the movies that you are releasing.
I mean, it's interesting because some of this, when you're listening to it, is the kind of common sense that drove e-commerce. I mean, it does feel like cinemas in particular are a long way behind the curve that every other business seems to have gone through. And maybe as an industry, we're also struggling to come to terms with things that if you could just stand back and find ways and just follow through what everyone else is doing, it feels like you may be opening up quite a lot of new opportunities.
Yeah, well, because we have a global footprint, we have a location over in Australia, we have operations in Canada, and we take a very global perspective on the market. And there are territories that are racing ahead of Europe. I mean, I think Europe, because we have such a established industry here, and a lot of cinemas, particularly on the independent side of things, are mom and dad operations that have been running for sometimes up to over 100 years. The fresh thinking is yet to enter. But I see, the last event that we went to, there are a lot of young people coming into the cinema side of the industry, and I think that's where the change is going to start to really accelerate over the next 5 to 10 years. But if you work in Japan in distribution, or if you work in certain parts of the French market, in Japan they have a system called Panda, where all the cinemas basically create one data point, a data platform, and the distributors can buy into it to start targeting people who have an interest in that movie genre, and also buy tickets. And in France, I believe, because of the issues with advertising on television, I think it's only recently that you could put a movie trailer up onto any of the TV channels there. The French market has always been forced to use online as the main vehicle for reaching audiences. And consequently, if you're working in French distribution, you have Allociné that you can buy campaigns through, which is monitoring all this kind of behavior. You have campaigns that you can book directly with the cinemas, and they'll return that information in terms of how many people have been reached and booked tickets. And you can start to formulate benchmarks in those markets. So why can't we do this in Germany? Why can't we do this in the Nordics? Why can't we do this in Central and Eastern Europe? Why can't we do this in Britain, right? These are all markets where we've had, Zalando and all these other, web shop experiences that do a great job of selling and conveying product. Why can't we do it in Western Europe? And I think that's the major change that we see that's coming.
Yeah, I mean, we're not a knowledge economy, and yet the knowledge economy has been driving so much of the rest of the economy. That sense that data and understanding how those audiences behave. It still feels, from what you're saying, we are away. We've still got quite a long way to go. I mean, it would be logical if lots of cinema chains, for example, if we were thinking about cinema, were working together, and you might even look at your problem with skaters and think about, I mean, even things like differential pricing. Even that's problematic still, even within our industry, and that's before you get to the relationship between cinema and online. That still feels to me like there's a huge data gap that's missing about knowing how to best maximize that relationship.
Yeah, so the one major change within cinema was everyone was forced to sell their tickets online. Everyone then had to start thinking about how do we make the concession systems for buying food and drink also available online. So that was a hard crunch for many different cinema operators around the world. And of course, when they start to realize now, even I think in Poland, most tickets are now still sold online. I think we did talk to a few Polish cinema operators recently, and they were saying exactly the same thing. The old people aren't coming back. Now our major ticket purchases are between 18 and 34, as opposed to 34 and 45. And our traditional ways of reaching them aren't as effective. That's because no one aged 18 is on Facebook because they're terrified about what their parents will find out about them, right? They're on TikTok, they're on Snapchat. If you're in Scandinavia, that seems to be the dominant platform amongst teenage girls there. They're in different niche communities within Reddit. So the whole process of finding these little nuggets of gold, are about looking at the whole system of behaviors that are associated with film interests. And there are, one side of behaviors is buying tickets online, and that pattern of buying tickets online that you want to expand because it is a habit. The other thing is different platforms yield different interests and behaviors. So we launched a new service called Gruvi Analytics in the last 7 or 8 months, and that's basically looking at the way people are communicating online, because one of the big failings that we see with distribution is the media planning, because it doesn't have an end point. Like you make your media plan, you do your best guess, you talk to your producers, you talk to your sales agents, and then again, you throw the money out there and cross your fingers and hope for the best. Because it's not connected to the point of sale, you're not seeing who's actually buying tickets. And you're not seeing where they're coming from either. And to communicate with someone on Reddit is a very, very different thing to communicating with someone who's on Snapchat. So, we've all got to get much, much better at telling better stories about our stories, but we've also got to look at the vehicles, the different social media that people are using, and make the small adjustments to the campaign to actually do a better job of persuading people as well.
Yeah, there's definitely a challenge there, and it's always interesting with the social media discussion how we still have rather a backwards attitude towards social media. I remember my daughter telling me 6 or 7 years ago saying, Facebook is the social media you tell your parents you're on, because that's not the one. That's just the shop window that looks like. But people still believe this stuff. I think that we still have a lot of rather aging attitudes.
I just wanted to say that, the research in Poland shows that not only young people are on TikTok, it's actually, all ages, I would say. It's up to 55, surprisingly, because we all thinking that TikTok is just a young platform, but it's not really. It's more and more people moving there.
Yep, you can see me skateboarding on there if you want to look. Can we, because I want to go through a few of these themes in a kind of debate thing. Has anybody got any questions at this point or points they want to make? Yeah. Can you, sorry, this is the Panda.
Yeah, you want to hear a little bit more about Panda in Japan?
Yes.
Yeah. So Japan, as everyone knows, super conservative society. I think it's about 100 million people in Japan, more or less. And they have a very active cinema scene there. Great local productions, but they also have a very healthy number of ticket sales for international movies as well. But it's a very insular market, very traditional, very conservative. So we were extremely surprised to see that the whole industry is now working together around this one data management platform, which is what we've been trying to build for Europe since 2017. And so basically what happens is the agencies built the platform and manage it. The cinemas have integrated their website, the tracking data using Google Analytics, which is a standard web tracking tool. And behind the cinemas are all the ticketing platforms. A good example would be, say, Vista that's used by, I think, about 60% of the major cinema operators around the world. And that data is being, anytime someone goes to the site, starts expressing interest in different films, the websites are tracking that film interest. When that user then starts to interact with the point of sale to try and book the ticket, that's when the ticket platform takes over. And the data from the ticket platform is then also being sent to this central hub, right? So between these two data sets, you as an individual interacting with, say, an art house drama film and attempting to buy a ticket is tracked anonymously into this platform. They don't know it's you. They know that if enough people do that, you can collect what's called a custom audience around that behavior. And you can visualize that behavior for future media planning, which means that you can look at that data set for the market and go, I'm releasing this type of movie. I'm planning on booking it into these kinds of cinemas. How much money am I going to make? How many people are going to interact with the campaign? And then you've got your benchmarks, right, that you can look at while the campaign is in operation. And then prior to the film actually releasing, you can have a good sense of, are you going to complete your targets, or are you going to be under, or are you going to be over? And if you're over, then you spend more because you're going to make exponentially more money out of those kinds of movies. So I look at distribution like venture capital, right? You invest in a bunch of ideas. Venture capital invests in a bunch of technology firms, and you make your bets. And out of the, say, 10 or 15 movies that you're releasing over the year, half are duds, half make their money back, and 2 or 3 exponentially perform, right? And therefore, if you've got that information about how your films are interacting with the audiences, you can cut back on the investments on the ones that aren't performing, and you can up the investments on the ones that are. And if anyone's familiar with what a Pareto distribution is, 20% of films will make you 80% of your profit, right? Just like the 20-80 rule with everything, that's what you want to be focusing on. And this is where the data can help you. So the Panda system was a real revelation, because we went into that market expecting back in 2017 that, because Japan was so conservative, this kind of thing wouldn't happen. And we were very surprised when we went to the meeting and were kind of shown that, hey, we've had this for the last 3 or 4 years, so thanks very much, but no thanks, right? But, that kind of proved the model to us that, hey, if Japan is doing it, why can't we do this in Europe?
No, it's such a logical approach, but I think I'd like to broaden out that discussion a bit because, the psychology of why we're not doing it is kind of interesting. And obviously there is the fragmentation element, there's different parts of the industry here. But Anne, maybe you could start us on this. It seems to me that what we're hearing here is still that what you want is a whole industry theoretically working together and saying, okay, the old strategy seemed to be very much built around cinemas, and it was, let's see how we can grow the total number of cinephiles. That's how the thing works, and your job is to take the critics and the old influencers and to expand the notion of cinephiles. Now it seems to me that what we're hearing more about is, no, what you want is that for the individual film, you need to be thinking in terms of the total potential audience for that film. That feels to me like a psychological difference, and one that still, producers and exhibitors perhaps still struggling to see that as being what the task is. And in a way, it's because we're very comfortable. We are a bubble in the film industry. We do tend to operate in a way which we don't really want to change, and we're kind of being forced to. So maybe just explain from your point of view, how do we go about making that change of thinking?
Yeah, that's difficult. That's something we struggle with in working with film theaters. We experience that it's very difficult to announce something out of the ordinary or announce something out of your daily routine. For instance, if we have a film that, we target, we had a film, like a political film, and there was this political party in the Netherlands, and then we had contact with them, and we agreed every member of this political party can see the film with €2 reduced, reduced price ticket. So we asked all the theaters to go along with this. And it's impossible because their systems are so old-fashioned and so, limited to a ticketing system, and there is no room for spontaneous actions or different things. So in the end, we took the €2 out of our share. Yeah. So. And that is something that we struggle with change with like a technological ticket system, but also in terms of marketing and like Windows. The very old Windows discussion.
Phil, do you want to grab that microphone? You've killed it.
Yeah, so that's something that we as a distributor, we like to move forward and would like to change things that are, like engraved in the time. But we need to do it together with the cinemas, and sometimes that's a real struggle. We want to move forward, but we can't if the cinemas are not moving with us. That's a bit of our daily work to try and change that.
Yeah, and Katarzyna, I think on the same point, I think it is. There's the big danger in here when I'm listening to Anne. What you're thinking is, if the exhibitors aren't changing and the producers aren't changing, what you'll end up with is, the world that I see you're suggesting is much more diverse. It's exciting. It's interesting. But if you're not doing those things and you don't have those opportunities, and that the cinemas and the producers perhaps are in a different mindset, they're going to start making more and more conservative choices, which means less and less diverse and exciting films, and more of the kind of stuff which feels like it's the easy option. That's what's most worrying to me.
Yeah, and that's what we see in Poland as well. And, if you think about the cinemas in Poland, only a third is actually multiplexes, and the rest is art house cinemas. And they do have a theoretically, they do have an association that combines all of them, but to cooperate with them or to find something that you could do as a group, it's really, really difficult, even like on a very basic level. So, there's plenty of cinemas that are part of local city culture centers, or owned by the local authorities. And there's many times that you still have people who kind of, the audience is not that as important as just going to work, and basically we struggle with people not interested in promoting films, that they kind of expect the distributor going to do everything, and that kind of and even if we do provide everything, we provide all the possible assets that you could think of, then you realize that they still don't know how to use them. So it is kind of frustrating. So for instance, like we, in the last few weeks, actually, we've kind of slightly thinking of how can we change that, because we even see that, for instance, we've identified about 25 art house cinemas that are the cinemas that we want to cooperate with, that out of there's 250 others, they're making on our films 80% of the result. So it's kind of like, we even think like, okay, we do all this work, we really work hard, we create these assets, we work with every cinema, and then you end up with 2 viewers per screening, which is very frustrating, but we still have to do the same amount of work. So for instance, we decided that, okay, we're gonna now focus on these 25 cinemas, and we're gonna know that they're good in promoting, and we'll see, how that will gonna go, because we decided we want to more invest time and money and effort into the ones that know what we're talking about.
And then maybe the others follow.
Yeah. Yeah, we do the same. We stopped in Holland. We have a saying, pulling a dead horse.
Flogging a dead horse, we say. We put that.
So we do. We have this. We have the same. Yeah.
Yeah, and you do begin. We'll come to. But you do begin to see where 2 visions are going. One is about expanding film going and film loving amongst people who are interested in the subjects, the creativity, the diversity attracts them, or the conservative view of nothing's going to change, and what we're going to do is just try and hold on to. And it's clear what side you're on. We have a question.
Yes. Hello. Good morning. I'm Sofia from Argentina, and I work for a film festival. And I was wondering, for Anna's this question, if you managed to get those audiences into the cinema theaters, because we're talking about going to the movies as an experience, and it used to be the experience, going to the movie. And you talked about the skater movie and how they attended to the event, but they didn't go into the movie. So I was wondering how we can manage in festivals and in theaters to get them inside, because you cannot beat the argument of we can watch it online later. So how can we recover the experience of going to the movie as it is, as an experience itself?
That's difficult, because you cannot physically push people into a cinema. Or
You can.
we would like to, but so you can only do so much to make sure that they're well informed, that the film is out on a certain date, that there's a trailer, that there is reviews in newspapers. So you have to do the basic work, but really come to their front door, and then the last step, like making a purchase online or buying or going to a physical cinema to buy a ticket, you don't have influence on that. And when we have this whole campaign and then we release a film, then basically it's out of our hands. And then we ask feedback of the film theaters, and like, can you monitor what kind of people buy these tickets, and if we have succeeded in reaching the skate community. And but film theaters don't have a lot of employees, and most of them are volunteers, so we don't get a lot of feedback. So that is probably something interesting for Gruvi to do in the Netherlands? Because I don't know how, do you already work with the Netherlands?
Yeah, we work with quite a few Dutch distributors. The issue is the scale of communication to the independent cinemas, right, and getting them to come on board. And certain independent cinemas are very, very pro, and others have no idea about their web operations. So what we're looking for, ideally, is to approach each market's independent scene, identify the cinemas that are important for the independent distributors, and maybe through Europa Cinema and Europa Distribution and the production unions, start to explain to them, look, we're all very interested in this industry thriving. Here's a way that we can show, from work we've done with Vox or Palace Cinemas or Nordisk Biograph or Real Cinemas or Alamo Drafthouse in the US, that really showcases if we can get the union working, even with the festivals as well. It's a very similar junction of ticket behavior and film interest and live reporting on who buys and modeling audiences and making sure that benchmarks are set around campaigns. I think there's a very, very bright future. The thing that we're scratching our heads around right now, and what I'd love to talk to you guys about, over the course of the next 3 days, is how do we scale this out efficiently with, the innovative independence that you guys all know in your local markets? Because we'll do the work free of charge in order to make that integration, because we're working with the distribution side of the business, and we get paid through the campaigns. So a more effective campaign for us is great because, again, we look like we're doing a great job when we are, but we need that connection with the cinema, and we're still sort of stumbling our way into that market at the moment.
Yeah, I'd like to bring Andrei in if I can at that point, because you have a festival, and you to an extent are on both sides of this. So you have the festivals. You've got to create an event around that festival. You've got to create something which gets that passion going. But I still don't entirely understand, because it feels to me like you then need to work out how that goes into what you decide to distribute. How does distribution fit in with that festival, and where does the kind of data and the knowledge work between those two things, the festival and the distribution?
Well, even though, as I said, we work in a larger structure, what works for the festival doesn't necessarily work for the usual film distribution. And hearing all of you talk right now and hearing the question, how can we make people better understand the cinema experience more than what a certain title would provide to them? Because as Anne was saying, that is an issue. How can we make them understand that some of the titles, not all of them, go better in a cinema as an experience? Even if we're talking about the image or the sound, or it goes better than at home. So when it comes to the audiences for the festival, yes, we do have some reports, and we know what kind of people go to the cinema during the festival, what is our usual bubble, and who are the ones that we address to. But when we come to the regular film distribution, everything changes. At least in Romania, we only have a couple of art house cinemas. We have a couple of big chains. And the way we communicate with them is really, really different. How can we bring our usual audience to the big cinema chains? That is something that we really struggle with, because even though we address the same audience that we address during the festival, the return is really, really different.
Yeah, and whilst all this is happening, we're kind of allowing a narrative to come in, and the narrative is that the big screen needs to be escapist and roller coastery. Someone was telling me, who isn't here, but will remain nameless, saying, I would never distribute a sad film in cinemas anymore. And you think, but that's, sad seems such an odd thing to decide, you know, that is the cutoff point. That seems to me where the end of the line happens, where you've decided that cinema is only for the big, exciting stuff, and the data doesn't necessarily suggest that. I presume even in your cats thing, Anne, it wasn't all happy. I imagine some of those cats, I bet some of them died. Some of them were having a pretty hard time.
No. To be honest, it's a happy film. Nobody died, but still, it is sad, if you want to call it sad, but that melancholy. That there are cats living on the streets. You know, it's like a problem. So there is an edge to that film. Yeah. But we released a film. It's called The Cave, and it's a very, very sad documentary. About a hospital in Iraq Afghanistan, and it's run by a woman, and she has to deal with the most horrible situations in war in hospitals, and she's doing it she's a woman of 33, and she runs this hospital by herself. It's an incredibly sad film. I cried, and of course you think, you know, is this releasable? But the film is such a value to your understanding of the war and understanding of humanity, and positive and hopeful that there are people like this 33-year-old doctor that actually changed the world and helped the world. So we chose to see it as a very positive film, and we didn't expect a lot of the release, because people, you know, on a Friday night, do they want to see this kind of content? That's hard to you know, anticipate on, but it went actually better than an average documentary. So, and that is probably because of the reviews, maybe, or the buzz around the film, and it was nominated for an Oscar as well. So maybe that helps, and a huge festival release. So, yeah, there was this talk about this film and a sense of urgency. And sometimes a film has that, you know, it doesn't matter what kind of content it is, when it's sort of urgent and people like, there's like a must-see factor, and then they will show up to the cinema, because otherwise they can see it 6 months later on Netflix or wherever. But if you want to be part of the urgency and part of the word of mouth, then you have to go to the cinema now. And so we experienced that with The Cave very much.
I think urgency is a really interesting and useful word, actually. Do you want to jump in there?
I just want to jump about this word of mouth thing, because as well it comes in the research that, you know, many people nowadays are not interested in reviews and stars and, you know, in what journalists have to say, but actually, you know, your friends and family telling you this is the film you need to see. It's really important. And even, you know, like, again, this Polish Film Institute research after pandemics, that was the main thing that makes people go to cinema. And if the film, that people know that, you know, films disappear from cinemas fairly quickly. So, you know, so if it becomes a film that everybody talk about and it's not available online, you also want to be a part of that community that's seen that film in the cinema. So, but that really depends on a film. I mean, it's kind of, you know, distribution is a risky business, and you never know which film gonna work and which one won't. And we have, for instance, the same case with Quo Vadis Aida, which is also, you know, about the massacre in Srebrenica, which is not a nice subject in any way. And yet, as well, you know, people really recommended to other people that film, and we really had a way better result than we expected. So,
you're pointing to another disconnect, aren't you, with cinemas, which, and it's not necessarily the cinemas themselves, it's there at the moment, word of mouth is very difficult when the weekend it's on will be one weekend. And if in that weekend everyone's telling their friends, oh, you must go and see this film, and the film isn't there, then it makes no difference how hard you've worked, and that's problematic.
Yeah, that's a massive disconnect, because our films, documentaries are a long tail, you know, people take a long time to realize that it's a documentary they must see. And so, especially a few years ago, our films were in cinemas maybe 8, 9, 10 weeks. And now it's 2-3 weeks maximum. And then the word of mouth issue is not longer.
No, and a lot of your strategies do seem to be driven by word of mouth. They seem to be that a lot of it is creating an audience around a film, getting them excited, building up a kind of personal relationship with the film. But if that film still has to be somewhere in order for them to have that relationship. And as I think Ben pointed out, habits are important. So the conversion from someone who comes for the cat film that they're interested in, but stays because they love cinema, that seems to me where the habit forming comes in. But that still feels like a missing link in all of the ways you're discussing it at the moment.
Yeah, but for instance, what Andrei is doing as well, we kind of use it in a way a bit, the festival, that first, festival is kind of your testing ground for a film and also a place where you create that word of mouth because, of course, in many commercial titles, they just go to cinemas, are being released on this particular weekend and that's it. But for art house cinemas and for art house films, you do have to start your work way early. So that's why, for instance, we do release our films as well. We premiere them on the festival that we co-create with our kind of sister company. And it is on one hand, testing ground what audience think about those films, whether they like it, whether they don't like it, what's the word of mouth. And then you kind of also use it as a way to later plan your marketing and plan your how big the film might be, what people say. And then also the pre-screenings, and any form of previews with guests or with, previews with debates is also a way of getting this audience, this kind of the most interested audience that will create your word of mouth, get them to cinema weeks ahead of your release. It kind of builds up to when you finally your release weekend comes, you kind of have this word of mouth. So that's kind of a strategy that you don't just start it a week before, of course, but you do work half a year before to create that word of mouth.
Yeah, that's what you're doing effectively, Andrei, isn't it?
Yes, actually, the festival is just the first step, because usually during the summer we have a lot of screenings with the upcoming titles, the ones that we'll release in autumn and maybe at the beginning of next year. We're gonna have a Romanian title soon, and while talking with the producer and with the director, they were asking us why are we screening the film that often. Is not that often. It's maybe once every 2 weeks in another city. Because maybe people won't come to the cinema. And I was asking them, how would you expect to have, 70, 80, 100,000 people if word of mouth doesn't go around?
Yeah, it's a challenge that I think you're definitely all raising. And I think maybe it goes back even further than that. When you're talking about data, Ben, at the development stage with public funding, it also feels like you would be helped if maybe when people were making films and thinking about it, they had some sense of where that audience was going to be. So it's a more holistic approach you're taking, but it feels like data and connection is missing all the way along the line. Yeah.
There's a question here.
Sorry, there's a question there.
Thank you, everyone. I'm thinking that everything that we've been talking here, this is complementary activities, and they don't live or succeed on their own. And of course, the role of festivals is much larger than just when the festival is happening, because most festivals also have year-long activities which do a very important role, which is film education. And I'm thinking that film education, it what actually educates people in the young age to actually enjoy cinema and understand what going to the cinema is. And I was listening to you and I was thinking, would it be that odd if distributors would actually act on this population as well, to deal and to have some activities on film education? Would it be that odd that distributors would join forces with film festivals, or maybe it's already happening and I'm just not seeing it?
Yeah, we in Holland we have a quite large film education system, and it's from either festivals or from cinemas themselves. And whenever we have a documentary that we think is suitable for a film education program, we apply to the cinemas and to the festivals, and then I think during ITVA, dus the Documentary Film Festival in Amsterdam, I think about maybe all, well, I'm not really sure about the numbers, but all schools in the region of Amsterdam are invited to take the whole class to see a documentary. And so we have, whenever we get back those data, it's huge. It's like a huge number of younger, I think 13 to 16-year-olds watch documentaries in cinema, and they all have a questionnaire afterwards, and they talk about the film. It's more than just watching a film; it's also talking about the film and understanding it. And no, we are actually. I really like that system in the Netherlands. Do you have it in your countries?
Well, we do have it as well. I mean, it's not this. I mean, some distributors do have part of their activities focused on education, but there's also associations or foundations who work on that and cooperate with distributors, with cinemas. All the multiplex chains have their education system, and there is one, like our sister company also have a whole education part that, you know, they work with over 30 cinemas and plenty of schools, and they even have a festival of kids cinema, which is also kind of not only in one city but in quite a few cities, and also in cooperation with the schools. And it's, you know, and it's really very valuable films for certain age groups to show that there's something more than just, you know, Avengers and Batman to see in cinema, and that those films are for the young audiences. And so yeah, it happens. But then you will see, you know, when they grew up, will they be still willing to go to adult films? I mean, not adult films, films for adults.
We know what you meant. and I'm sure in Romania you're doing the...
Yeah, we're not that far yet, but there are a couple of initiatives regarding film education right now. One of them has been started by my colleagues that are working for the film festival, and they're entering a couple of high schools this autumn. They even have some materials that they're preparing for, I think, more than half a year now. And there are some other colleagues from other initiatives, film festivals, that are also working on one. They started also this autumn. So we're trying to somehow reach the schools, have something optional in the beginning, and maybe more in the following years.
Okay, do we have any more questions, or because we need to kind of sum up this discussion then? I think we're, I think there's a lot of logic in here about the changing business as perceived by distributors that can't be seen in that narrow old sense here. I think you need to see distribution and publishing in a broader context, and I think we're hearing that there isn't this kind of, there's no old school ideas there. There's nothing as if we're going back to the days where it was a very linear process. I think what we're talking about here is a shift from a relationship with audience which is marketing to, in a sense, a homogenous group of people, to creating relationships with known audiences. And I think what we're hearing is that there are lots of techniques for doing that we're hearing. Some of it is about finding the right kind of social media that's actually being used by the people who were there. So we heard about the TikTok approach, which was not, again, it wasn't one-way marketing. It was about creating a feeling of belonging and a sense of purpose. You know, there was a feeling that this is your film and you can be involved in this in some way. And so it wasn't social media of the old school. It was also not just building all of a campaign only around cinephiles who were already the existing market. It is about finding what's in that film, what are those elements within the film itself, and who are those audiences that are interested in those elements, and where do they live? How can you find out how they interact, how they behave, what their interests are, what social media they're creating? That seems to me incredibly valuable. It feels to me that there's a missing link here, which I think Ben is talking about to an extent, and all of you are to an extent. And that is that you can do these things, but at the moment it feels like a lot of work. It feels like nothing's really automated. Everything becomes R&D from the beginning. And that kind of data and knowledge seems to me a very big missing link. And Ben's already pointing out that the traditional industry was very poor at engaging with those kind of things. And it means a lot of the pressure is on the distributor, publisher to actually make these models, do this R&D themselves. And there feels like the missing links are still there in the industry, that you can do all of this work and still have that problem of being in an industry where you don't necessarily have the final step that can make this work. You can build word of mouth, but if the film isn't there, that word of mouth may be lost somewhere in the ether. But I think what Ben's pointing to, and I think that's the theme of this session, is the techniques for making this happen are there. It's not about reinventing these things. It is possible to create these, and we've heard examples here of really exciting ways to engage audiences. And as Ben was saying, the opportunities don't take a lot of thinking. It's what lots of people are doing. It was called e-commerce a while ago. It's what everyone in the rest of the world is doing all the time. And it feels like there's an evangelical element that needs to come with the rest of the industry to say, your choices here are a world which is beginning to open up that will allow risk-taking, diverse, exciting European film to connect with real audiences in ways that maybe would open up new demographics and aren't just confined to an old school, or just letting this this situation just continue where you've lost some audiences, and what you do to try and get those audiences back is take the cheapest choice, to put on Top Gun, to put on something which you think is going to cover those things. One way, which is the way we've heard today, seems to me the future and the excitement that could be a diverse European film industry. The other feels to me like a slow death. It feels to me like something that marginalizes and leaves people without that sense of it being part of their culture. Cinema is no longer their habit. It's something which has been lost. But what we're hearing here is it won't be lost because of any of the ideas that we're seeing on this panel, and hopefully those ideas are the ones that you have and are listening to and are either already doing or are planning to do. And I'm hoping that positive view is the one that will prevail.
Can I just add something quickly?
Please do.
So if you are working in partnership with innovative cinemas on the exhibition side, where you're having the opportunity to dialogue with them around special relationships and releasing your films, come and talk to me, because this is what we're focusing on. We proved it with large-scale chains like Vox and Palace, and but they're 100+ locations in some cases. So one integration for us is very easy. What we're looking for is the front runners in cinema that are thinking about the future in the right kind of way, and that you already have a good relationship with. Because I would love to talk to these guys around this idea of this data partnership to try and make Panda happen here in Europe. The other good bit of news is we found that behaviors model internationally. So someone who buys tickets and has an art house interest in Poland models very well into Germany, models very well into Norway, models very well into Australia. So you're all working in your on independent film in your local markets. We built Eurofilm launches 3 years ago to try and get a site so you could see who's bought the rights for different films, so that which French distributor is working on it, and maybe that film is released 2 months before you've had it released in your market. We built that platform so that you can then start to pick up the phone and start to talk to your partners within the industry just to find out, how the release went, which creative they use. Because there's a lot of scale here, right? Reinventing the wheel with each movie poster, reinventing the wheel with each trailer edit, that costs money. There should be some system of beginning to collaborate from an information perspective, and particularly on the audience side as well. Like I said, a Polish audience that buys tickets for an art house movie is very easy to model into a German, Dutch, English, you name it. It's the international behavior of buying tickets and going to cinema that we can actually identify online.
Okay, so there's a starting point for you over the next few days. So we're going to wrap. So first of all, a round of applause, I think, for the panel.